Hear these leftists moan about January 6th while harassing and violating the core fundamental constitutional liberties and rights of citizens. So speaking of the FBI, as I said, the corruption continues. There's this targeting. The FBI just can't help themselves when it comes to going after the political opposition of the deep state. And in January 6th, it was reported that Bank of America, in the least, had turned over banking records to the FBI of anyone in the D.C. area. So I'm in the D.C. area, so if I had, the way I read the reports, that if I had used my debit card, it could have been turned over to the FBI, even though I wasn't anywhere near the rally or anything else that happened. So all sorts of Americans were caught up in this dragnet, which is illegal. It's illegal under the law. The FBI can't just go around collecting records because they feel like it. So we're trying to figure out what went on. We asked the FBI for the records. You know what they told us? We can't confirm or deny the records exist, which is bunk. That type of response is used to protect, top secret operations and war plans, national security related data, not like a typical law enforcement technique. Did you do a subpoena or not? I mean, how's that a state secret? It's obviously a lie. And we filed a response to the FBI in the federal court case we brought to get these records. We want to know about this surveillance of American citizens' financial transactions. I think it's interesting. There's all this, I don't know where it stands now in terms of the effort by the left to increase the IRS's power to observe your banking transactions or your banking activity generally. But I think back to what the FBI just, it looks like they didn't need a subpoena and they just got the records. I don't know what went on. I mean, what already happened is bad enough. My point is, this is what we sued for. All records of communications between the FBI and any financial institution, including but not limited to Bank of America, Citibank, Chase Manhattan, Bank, Discover, and/or American Express, in which the FBI sought transaction data for those financial institutions' debit and credit card account holders who made purchases in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and/or Virginia on January 5th and 6th, 2021. And so what Judicial Watch says is they can't hide behind this I can't confirm or deny excuse. And we first of all, that excuse is almost always blown out of the water if they've confirmed or denied it elsewhere. And there was at least one other FOIA request where they confirmed that they might have records, but they wouldn't turn them over because of law enforcement related exemptions, which is a more straightforward Freedom of Information Act dispute. So A, that's the big deal. B, the second big deal is if you're engaged in misconduct, you can't say I can't confirm or deny to hide the misconduct from the American people. And that's what I want to focus on in our brief. This is what exactly they said, by the way, to the FBI. Please be advised that it is the FBI's policy to neither confirm nor deny the existence of any records which would disclose the existence or non-existence of non-public law enforcement techniques, procedures, and/or guidelines. The acknowledgement that any such records exist or do not exist could reasonably be expected to risk circumvention of law. So the idea that the FBI can monitor your banking transactions is a secret law enforcement technique? Who are they kidding? Talk about corruption. It's what we deal with all the time at Judicial Watch. I'm surprised I'm able to not just completely have my head explode sometimes dealing with this government lawlessness. And this was what we say. I'm going to read a bit from the brief because we used there was a former senior FBI official who's done this work before. He knows what the rules are in terms of gathering this type of information. And he gave us a declaration that we could give to the court to explain what was going on here with the FBI's gamesmanship. This is what we wrote. I'm going to read you a few paragraphs. In this case, the FBI appears to have conducted an improper broad sweep of financial records, not just of those persons it had reason to believe were involved in the events of January 6th, but many more Americans. Detailed media reports not only indicate the FBI sought financial records, but also set forth in detail the specific criteria and scope of the records obtained. And as described in the declaration of our former FBI friend, such a broad sweep of financial records would be improper. Now, according to the FBI official's declaration, the former FBI official's declaration, the FBI has several legal avenues available to pursue private individuals' financial records. They include obtaining a federal grand jury subpoena, a search warrant, or a national security letter. And of course, at all times, they're supposed to follow the laws, and there are specific rules and regulations that implement those laws in the Justice Department called the Attorney General Guidelines or the Domestic Investigations and Operations Guide. All that was thrown out the window, it looks like. As we explained, or as our FBI official explained, a request by the FBI of certain banks to voluntarily turn over to the FBI the private financial transaction data of any bank customer who happened to be in a certain broad geographical area on a certain date could be interpreted as an effort to circumvent protections under the law. That's being nice, isn't it? This is because, as set forth, as said by those Attorney General guidelines, the FBI may not collect and store intelligence information on an individual, especially when that individual is a U.S. citizen, without articulating reasonable suspicion that the individual was or is or about to be engaged in violation of federal law. So they can't go and look at the phone book of Washington, D.C. I guess I'm showing my age. There are no such things as no more hot phone books anymore, right? And just compile a file on everyone in the phone book. Well, that's what they did, it looks like, potentially, in gathering all this financial data of anyone who actually engaged in financial transactions in or around January 6th. They just can't keep a file on you without having some fair understanding that you may have committed a crime or could be a suspect or someone important to an investigation. A blanket sweep of all bank customer transactions in a certain area at a certain time does not meet the bare minimum reasonable suspicion threshold, since a significant amount of data would logically include innocent and lawful transactions the FBI does not have a right to collect. As a result, the requests by the FBI for voluntary cooperation by the banks with net information the FBI would not otherwise be able to legally obtain. If confirmed, the FBI's efforts would constitute an extra-constitutional workaround that potentially enabled inappropriate government surveillance of lawful activities. There you have it. That's the 1-6 investigation that needs to be done, and Judicial Watch is doing it. So as Pelosi continues to use 1-6 as a pretext to harass Trump supporters and try to criminalize objections to the way the elections were conducted in 2020, Judicial Watch steps into the gap to find out what the FBI was doing to spy on American citizens whose only crime was being a resident of the District of Columbia or Maryland and Virginia and engaging in a financial transaction. I mean, so to hear these leftists moan about January 6th while harassing and violating the core fundamental constitutional liberties and rights of citizens just gets my goat. This is why I love Judicial Watch, because we're in court fighting for this. The media ain't doing it. I don't know where the Republicans are. They don't even talk about it. A few do. They're the exceptions that prove the rule in terms of the leadership of Congress, both Republican and Democrat. I don't know what's worse, one party that targets the opposition or the other party that lets it happen without much objection. But this is why Judicial Watch is so important, because we step in irrespective of party. So I don't know how the court's going to rule here. Let me see what this filing is called. Plaintiff's memorandum points in opposition to motion for summary judgment. So I guess the government will reply to this, I think, and then the court will rule. I don't know how long the court's going to take to rule. It's I think it's before Judge Lamberth, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So if anything happens, I'll let you know. But in the meantime, you can read this material, and I encourage you to do it and to share it and educate yourself and your fellow Americans about what we're doing here. Because what went on and is going on related to January 6th makes what went on in January 6th really seem inconsequential, because it's the governmental abuse using January 6th as a pretext that's the big issue now.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.